Hidden in forests and under mountains across Europe are the remains of a top-secret Nazi weapons program.
That's an incredible structure.
A vast network of research labs, launch pads, and missile silos. And a terrifying weapon unlike anything the world had ever seen before.
It could break the sound barrier.
The world's first ballistic missile.
This changes the face of warfare. This changes the history of the modern age.
I want total devastation, complete devastation.
This is the story of a Nazi genius who built cutting-edge bases to create a revolutionary space-age weapon. And the technology that ultimately put men on the moon. The V2 rocket program. The biggest construction projects of World War II. Ordered by Hitler to secure world domination. Now they survive as dark reminders of the Führer's fanatical military ambitions. These are the secrets of the Nazi megastructures. Saturday, the 3rd of October, 1942. A team of Nazi scientists arrive at one of Germany's most secret military installations to launch a completely new kind of weapon. Leading them is Wernher von Braun. At the age of just 30, he's the world's leading rocket scientist. Von Braun's goal is to create the world's first long-range guided missile. A weapon that the Nazis hope will decide the outcome of World War II.
Hauptstufe! Hauptstufe gegeben! Decker gefallen!
It's broken the sound barrier!
Years ago, this looked completely different.
Rocket scientist and V2 expert Dr. Olaf Schabilski is standing on the very spot where this launch happened more than 70 years ago.
You have to imagine that the trees weren't here. It was all level, partially paved.
This is Peenemünde, a vast Nazi laboratory built to win World War II. In 1942, the Nazis dominate Europe, but the war will soon turn against them. America, Britain, and Russia are fighting back, and Hitler has pinned his hopes on rockets to pound Britain into submission.
In Hitler's mind, this is terror. It's about scaring the population. And he feels that he can frighten Britain with this weapon sufficiently to drive them out of the war.
It was a weapon that had its beginnings over 10 years earlier. In the 1920s, teenage genius von Braun was part of an amateur rocket craze sweeping Germany. This history has fascinated Martin Themar, head of rocketry at Dresden University, all his life.
Rockets became very popular. You had societies forming here in Germany. Young people got together trying to build little rockets.
Rockets were previously fueled by gunpowder. But that meant they were unguided, unpredictable, and only able to travel a few hundred meters. As a weapon, the greatest danger they posed was to the people launching them.
In its early development, rockets were loud. They were certainly colorful and bright and potentially scary for things like cavalry, but they were in no way a significant battlefield weapon.
In the early 1930s, von Braun started working with a new technology, liquid-fueled rockets. A powerful weapon with the potential to travel huge distances. His work catches the attention of the German army. They ask von Braun to demonstrate his latest prototype.
Mr. von Braun. A moment, please.
The launch is a failure. But surprisingly, the military offer him the funding he needs.
What is your ambition?
I want to get on the moon, to build the rocket that will put the first man on the moon. It's possible. We can do it.
And it's all due to Hitler. When he comes to power in the 1930s, he greenlights almost unlimited funding for military projects.
Hitler is fascinated with scale. He wants big, bigger, biggest. He builds his stadium in Nuremberg for his rallies to be the biggest stadium on the earth. He wants to build the biggest motorway system on earth. He wants to build more tanks, more of aircraft than anyone else in the world has. He is absolutely fascinated with scale.
Hitler starts rearming Germany. And in 1935, the Nazis order Werner von Braun to establish the world's first rocket base. A high-tech facility where he can build, test, and launch his most recent designs. It will be the largest weapons lab on Earth, with the highest levels of secrecy. Von Braun's first task is to identify a remote location where the new complex can be hidden from other countries. He selects Peenemünde on the Baltic coast, a wilderness of dunes, marshes, and forests 50 kilometers from the nearest major town. Christian Mulldorfer-Vogt is the leading expert on what remains of the rocket base.
We're entering the research center area, and here was the first checkpoint. There were fences, there were dogs.
Hidden in the forest are the remnants of one of the largest military complexes ever built.
Peenemünde is a location where the modern science was invented, part of the history of mankind.
It's the perfect place to test rockets, for one reason.
The flight had to be documented for the whole time. And so you need a straight coastline.
The coastline, more than 250 kilometers long, could be rigged with cameras to monitor rockets in flight. With the site chosen, work can begin on the missile base itself. In August 1936, over 10,000 workers descend on Peenemünde. Over 25 square kilometers, they build labs for more than 2,000 scientists, missile factories, and launch pads. To keep it all top secret, they plan to design and build everything on site. But this will require a vast amount of electricity. So von Braun builds a power station, burning over 200 tons of coal every day. As rocket physicist Professor Martin Tamar explains.
Well, it's really terrific. It was one of the largest power plants that were built in the late 1930s just to supply a research center. 30 megawatts of power. Most of that was used to make a rocket propellant, liquid oxygen. That gives you unlimited possibilities.
75% of the energy produced goes to a vast liquid oxygen plant that manufactures the vital rocket fuel. As big as a football field, the liquid oxygen factory produces 13,000 kilograms of fuel per day, enough for 3 V2 rockets.
This place was definitely groundbreaking. So you had facilities, you invented facilities that didn't exist before.
The rocket isn't the only scientific marvel. So is the technology required to design it. The site's wind tunnel is the first in the world that can simulate the missile's incredible speed.
Just imagining a supersonic wind tunnel, Mach 4.4 speeds, you couldn't think about such kind of facilities before.
The V-weapons development at Peenemünde cost over $30 billion in today's money. By 1938, the facility is operational, and full control is handed to Werner von Braun. But away from the isolation of Peenemünde, events are about to give added urgency to von Braun's work. Hitler is planning to plunge Europe into war.
There are some key people in the German government who see von Braun's rocket development as a potential key weapon in the war that will come.
After investing billions, the army are impatient to get their hands on a working missile. But there's a problem. Von Braun's first prototypes suffer a succession of failures. The engines are underpowered, and he can't control the rockets in flight.
Von Braun was struggling with explosions on the launch pad, off the pad, and in the air.
The timing couldn't be worse. Von Braun has just been ordered to demonstrate his latest engine to the Führer himself. At stake is the future of the entire Nazi rocket program. In March 1939, a group of high-ranking Nazis gather at a top-secret location to watch a test firing of Werner von Braun's latest rocket engine. All eyes are on the Führer.
Mein Führer, we believe that a rocket could reach a speed of 5,000 kilometers per hour in only 30 seconds.
The engine functions perfectly.
Meine Herren, das nächste.
But while Hitler continues funding the project, he refuses to prioritize the weapon.
It may seem surprising that Hitler wasn't interested in something so obviously futuristic and cutting edge, but a strategic rocket force is well beyond what Hitler thinks he needs.
In September 1939, Hitler's armies invade Poland. The Second World War has begun. Within a year, much of Western Europe has been occupied. Hitler's faith in conventional weapons is proved correct.
When Hitler does invade Western Europe, he does it in a matter of weeks, and he does it with, effectively, a conventional army. Tanks, infantry, airplanes operating in cooperation. Why does he need any more strategic weapon? Why does he need rockets?
Undeterred, von Braun continues to push ahead with designing a functional, flying missile. Every test is filmed by a camera crew. And with no computers to simulate launches, the only way to test a rocket is to do it for real.
We're here in the Holy of Holies at Peenemünde. This is where they wanted to prove whether their rockets could fly.
The launch site is surrounded by huge banks of earth and reinforced concrete to protect the scientists.
Ist durchgeschaltet. Rüstung klar, Zündung klar, Vorstufe klar.
The rockets are supposed to take off and fly along the coast, but launches often go dangerously wrong.
This is a fire extinguisher, or rather a hydrant for extinguishing the possible explosion.
As well as risking lives, every rocket failure destroys thousands of valuable components. So the engineers spend weeks setting up each test.
Before a rocket could be launched, in case thousands of scientists were blown up, it had to be prepared.
The launch pad is in the center. Next to it is an engine test area with a flame pit, faced by a concrete observation bunker. A railway ferries the rockets to the launch pad from a preparation hangar, 9 stories high.
The rockets were hung in a test building. The electrics and electronics were checked. When they were okay, it was ferried on a rail-like runway into the testing area that we see over there. The excitement reached its climax just before the rocket was launched, when the relays were laid out and one hoped that it would be successful.
But success is proving elusive. In the summer of 1942, there is a series of V2 rocket test failures.
It was a step-by-step and trial and error. It was a very difficult task. Examining all the remaining parts, so you check for every piece of evidence to identify the specific cause of the failure.
Von Braun has 2 major technical problems to solve. The first problem is creating an engine that can power a 13-ton rocket more than 4 times the speed of sound, carrying enough fuel to travel a distance of nearly 200 kilometers.
Well, it seems like the rocket goes up very steep and everything seems to look okay, but it seems like probably there's a premature engine cutoff.
The extreme heat produced by burning fuel is damaging the engine. Von Braun's solution is to pump the fuel through a double skin around the engine. The colder fuel extracts enough heat to keep the engine functioning. Von Braun's next problem is keeping the rocket stable and on course once in the air.
Well, as you can see, first the rocket takes off. Looks okay, but then immediately you see how it starts to roll and tumble. So it seems like there is a guidance and navigation problem. It goes off in the wrong direction.
At the time, there is no way to steer a rocket from the ground. So, to keep the V2 on course, Von Braun gets the rockets to steer themselves using gyroscopes and a series of rudders. After years of research, Von Braun finally believes he has a rocket that will work.
Die Steuerung klar ist klar. Triebwerk klar ist klar.
Saturday, the 3rd of October, 1942.
Zündung klar, Vorstufe klar.
Von Braun and his army paymasters await the launch of his latest prototype missile.
Hauptstufe! Hauptstufe gegeben! Decker gefallen!
It's broken the sound barrier.
Very good.
Yes, but will it reach the target?
Do you realize what we've done? The spaceship is born!
Yes, indeed.
If you think our headaches are over, I'm telling you, they're just beginning!
In complete secrecy and unknown to the Allies, Werner von Braun has created the first ballistic missile. He's launched a 13-ton rocket through the Earth's atmosphere and over a distance of 190 kilometers, eventually crashing into the Baltic Sea. And he's close to delivering Germany's military a much-needed boost.
By late 42, 43, the war is not going terribly well for Hitler. His shock invasion of Russia is starting to bog down, and he is hemorrhaging troops and equipment and money into Russia. Worse, the Japanese have bombed Pearl Harbor, and this has brought the Americans into the war against the Axis. An increasingly desperate and self-deluded Hitler starts talking mysteriously about these wonder weapons, which will somehow pull Germany out of its extremely dire situation.
One of these wonder weapons is von Braun's rocket. In July 1943, von Braun and his army chief Dornberger are summoned to meet Hitler.
Achtung!
Heil Hitler!
I'm told you've made some useful progress, Dornberger. Is that correct?
Yes, my Führer. Von Braun will explain.
Bitte.
What you can see here is the first projectile to be launched into outer space. Within 30 seconds, it is traveling at around 5,000 kilometers per hour. It can strike London within 3 minutes. Its warhead contains 1 ton of high explosives.
We need a bigger warhead.
A bigger warhead may not be possible, my Führer.
I want total devastation. Complete devastation.
Von Braun becomes a victim of his own success. He wants Hitler's attention, and now he's got it. The Führer instantly demands thousands of these weapons. He demands V2s to be produced at a rate orders of magnitude greater than what von Braun is capable of producing.
What the Führer doesn't realize is that he has seen the only successful launch of the rocket. But as von Braun focuses on producing a reliable weapon, Allied aircraft take over German skies. And unknown to the Germans, an Allied aerial reconnaissance photo has uncovered the Nazis' top-secret base at Peenemünde. British bombers are closing in. Throughout the summer, Werner von Braun and his team of Nazi engineers work day and night to build a reliable missile. All he needs is a little more time, and he'll be able to deliver Hitler a devastating new weapon.
Good evening, Herr Direktor.
Good evening. Do you have a cigarette for me, please?
Yes.
Is that the artificial fog?
Everyone take cover!
Peenemünde is under attack from over 500 British aircraft. The top-secret base is no longer secret.
We've got to save the plans!
10 years of work by thousands of people is going up in smoke. The Allies hope that the raid will set back the rocket by months or even years. If project leader von Braun is killed and his work destroyed, the program will be stopped in its tracks. Over 1,800 tons of bombs are dropped on Peenemünde.
Here was an impact, and this impact caused this hole here, this crater.
The enormous size of Peenemünde makes it an easy target for Allied bombers.
Once the British intelligence establishment works out what Peenemünde is, it's a sitting duck. It's all above ground, and there's very little the Germans can do to protect it from the massive Allied air superiority.
Von Braun survives, but Peenemünde is no longer safe. It's impossible to defend from aerial attack. His rocket research center will have to move out of reach of Allied bombs if it's going to achieve its aim of flattening London. Engineers immediately scout for new locations deep inside Germany. But where can they hide the giant rockets and all the equipment needed to manufacture them? The answer lies in an abandoned mine in central Germany called Mittelwerk. Jens Christian Wagner is a leading authority on the site.
Right here in the middle of Germany, there was a huge underground tunnel system which had been constructed since 1936. It was a gypsum quarry. Nazi officials decided to change this into an underground rocket factory.
Peenemünde was this incredible center of science and technology, and now they're trying to do the same thing in Mittelwerk, which is a dark, wet cave.
"7,000 slave laborers carve out 2 parallel tunnels, totaling over 3,000 meters long. One holds a road and double-track railway for supplies. The second contains machinery to build the rockets. Connecting them are 46 smaller tunnels, each 150 meters long. In all, there were 11 kilometers of tunnels with a floor space of 93,000 square meters.
This is part of the production assembly line of the V2. So from the perspective of the Nazis, this was very successful. This factory was finished in 4 months.
But just as the factory finally begins to produce rockets, von Braun suddenly finds himself with a new master.
As the war is going increasingly poorly for the Germans, the SS make power grabs throughout the military establishment. One of the objects of these power grabs is von Braun's V2 program.
SS General Hans Kammler made his name by increasing the efficiency of the cremation ovens at Auschwitz.
Hans Kammler was ruthless. He was an engineer of destruction.
Now he takes control of the entire factory and its staff of slave laborers. Von Braun is ordered to focus on the design flaws and leave the manufacturing to Kammler. Production increases from 50 rockets in January 1944 to 437 in May. But these rockets are assembled in appalling conditions, and most don't work.
The first rockets that were thrown together there were bolted and screwed together by unskilled workers and prisoners. They were junk, utter junk.
By 1944, the Nazis desperately need the rockets. The war has turned decisively against them. The Russians are advancing in the east, and Allied aircraft are destroying German cities. The Mittelwerk facility is ordered to produce 900 rockets per month. And Kammler uses brutal methods to increase production.
Many prisoners died, beaten, murdered by SS and civilian overseers. Most of them died by exhaustion, others by starvation. About 10,000 prisoners had to live and to die here underground.
Kamler rushes V2 rockets off the production line at Mittelwerk. But there is still a huge problem to overcome. Where to build the launch pads and how to protect them.
The Germans can't launch the V2 from Mittelwerk. It's too far away. They have to move the weapon closer to its principal target, which is Britain, and so they have to launch them from somewhere in northern France.
Hitler ignores army requests for small, less detectable mobile sites and orders the construction of a massive rocket base called La Coupole.
Hitler inevitably gets involved in the debate and, again, almost inevitably chooses the big engineering solution to the problem. He goes for a big static missile launching site.
Beneath a vast concrete dome, the rockets can be prepared and then launched at London.
Wow. That's an incredible structure, really.
Arthur van Beveren is a leading authority on German fortifications in Northern Europe.
It's really an amazing structure, 71 meters in diameter, 5 meters thick, 55,000 tons. They laid a huge amount of concrete over the mountain and dug out the chalk underneath it. Building this dome in the way they did allowed them to continue the work inside the mountain while being under constant air attacks.
The dome's density and shape meant that even the largest bombs couldn't penetrate it.
You can see a block of concrete over there, which is actually part of the wall where the V2 rocket came out. And it will be driven towards that flat area over there, and that's the actual launching platform. This would be the place where the trains would go right into the mountains. The V2 rockets would be on trains, horizontal, and drove right into this tunnel.
In 1944, the Nazis are desperate for working rockets. They're being pushed back by the Allies in Italy and the Russians in Eastern Europe. They plan to stockpile V2s in these tunnels until they're needed.
We're now entering a part of the tunnel which is normally restricted because it's unfinished and it's kind of dangerous and unstable inside here. We're now deep, hundreds of meters into the mountain. The V2 rockets needed fuel, which was liquid oxygen. And the idea was that they built a liquid oxygen factory inside this mountain. And it will provide enough liquid oxygen to fire at least 15 V2 rockets every day.
The tunnels of this huge engineering project house hospitals, barracks, and every facility that the crews need to live entirely underground.
You can actually see how they dig through these chalk walls. I can almost do it by hand, here and here. Wow, if it's what I think it is, really looks like one of the drills they would use in 1944. Let's see if it fits. I guess so. Yeah, it fits perfectly. It's amazing to find after 70 years, still inside these tunnels. You can see one of those beams. Don't know if it's a safe plan to go underneath. It's totally rotten.
Underneath the dome, a giant hall is constructed, where the missiles can be prepared for launch.
Now entering the octagonal room. Well, it's the massive 6-story hall, which is underneath the dome. It's 24 meters high in total, inside a mountain. It's absolutely amazing. The V2 rockets will be brought in from the tunnels, put here, and will be set vertical. And you can see we've got one floor here, one there, and more floors. Every floor had its own crew, for example, fueling and a warhead. Once the V2 rocket was filled, it will be driven outside to the launching emplacement, and it will be fired against London.
The Nazis plan that La Coupole will launch up to 15 rockets a day to smash London. As soon as the weapons arrive from Germany, the British capital will face an unstoppable bombardment. But back at Mittelwerk, the missiles emerging from the underground factory are still plagued by a reliability problem.
The biggest problem we have is the materials and manufacturing quality.
And SS General Kammler is putting extreme pressure on von Braun to find a solution. In the first half of 1944, the Nazi ballistic missile is approaching completion. And Werner von Braun's rockets are nearly ready to decimate Britain. They're given a name, V2. V for Vergeltungswaffen, or vengeance weapon. There is just one obstacle to overcome. After the rocket's launch, many suffer technical problems. They climb high into the stratosphere, but then something malfunctions.
3,000 individual components have to work together, and if a bearing or a relay doesn't work, or a valve isn't properly sealed, the rocket won't fly.
Von Braun didn't understand why the rocket's body was failing.
One factor makes his job even harder. In 1944, there's no technology capable of capturing close-up images of the rocket at high altitude. With the Allies hammering Germany, he makes a desperate last-ditch gamble. He decides to get up close to a malfunctioning rocket as its wreckage falls to the ground. Von Braun narrowly escapes with his life, but finds the answer. He sees that the rocket's body has been deformed before it hits the ground. From this, he deduces that the structural framework of the rocket and its outer skin are buckling under the extreme pressures of supersonic flight. Von Braun reinforces the fuselage and the failure rate drops dramatically.
2 years after the first flight, von Braun had finally built a reliable rocket.
V2s begin to roll off the production line. London is only weeks away from bombardment. But in June 1944, the V2 program suffers two huge body blows. The Allies receive intelligence that La Coupole is a possible launch site. It is hit by a succession of massive British bombs.
La Coupole has one major design flaw. Its roof is impenetrable, very, very thick concrete, but the chalk around it is extremely soft. The bombing raids crush all the supporting and logistical tunnels around La Coupole, effectively putting La Coupole out of action before it even fires its first rocket.
Then the Allies storm the Normandy beaches on D-Day.
Just as von Braun is ready to unleash the V2 campaign against Britain, the Allies attack and land in northern France. The sites that von Braun needs to launch his weapon against Britain are threatened by the oncoming Allied army.
Hitler has made a critical mistake. The big static site he demanded was easy for the Allies to attack. In desperation, the Nazis rush to mount the rockets on mobile launchers. as the army had originally requested.
A mobile missile launcher can be moved anywhere you want it to. It can be hidden in forests or in built-up areas. It offers the advantage of being harder to find.
Steuerung klar ist klar. Triebwerk klar ist klar.
After 11 years of development, SS General Hans Kammler commands the first missile attack on London on September the 8th, 1944. Hitler's terror weapon is finally unleashed.
What Hitler hopes to do with the V2 campaign is to destroy London and other major cities. He hopes to drive the British out of the war.
In 6 months, over 3,000 rockets are fired towards London, southern England, and Belgium.
If you're a civilian on the ground, you've got this rocket moving supersonically, which you can't hear, and which has been launched only a few minutes before. There's no possible way they can get you warning. There's no way for you to hide. It's an extremely frightening event.
But the V2 has arrived too late to turn the war. By 1945, the Allies are swarming into Germany, pushing the mobile launch sites out of range of Allied cities. The last V2 to hit London explodes on March the 27th, 1945. In total, more than 5,000 people have been killed by the weapon. If large numbers of V2s had been available 6 months earlier, D-Day may never have happened. But the sheer size and cost of the project meant that it arrived too late to save Germany, and may even have helped to defeat it.
On May 2nd, 1945, von Braun surrenders to American forces in Bavaria. The USA now had the brains of the rocket program in custody.
5 days later, the war in Europe is over. But von Braun's career as a rocket scientist has just begun. Von Braun and 600 other German scientists and their families are shipped to America, along with 100 complete V2 rockets.
Under the Americans, he had the possibility to pursue his research in the direction he had always wanted to go, which was towards the direction of space travel.
Von Braun was feted by President Kennedy, and he finally achieved his life's ambition when his Saturn V rocket put Neil Armstrong on the moon.
Liftoff. We have a liftoff. Liftoff on Apollo 11.
NASA gave him its Distinguished Service Medal in 1969. His V2 may not have won the war, but it ultimately conquered space and changed the course of human history.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.